Welcome to Vintage Weights PGH. This is Lift History Podcast, and we're going to explore what the greatest bench presser of all time used to bench press. What was his bench? I'm talking about Doug Hepburn, the first man to bench press raw 400 pounds, 450 pounds, 500 pounds, 550 pounds. Back in the 1950s, this guy was considered the world's strongest man even before there was a competition for such a thing. He set all these records. He battled demons. He struggled with many things in life, and we'll get into that. But what set me on this path was an interesting article that I found in an old Iron Man magazine. Before we get too far into that, if this is your first time tuning in to Vintage Weights PGH, thanks for coming by. Make sure you like and subscribe. This is the channel where I explore strength history and all of the weights and equipment that made these things happen. And I make modern connections as well. Whenever you hear about modern equipment, please explore that modern equipment with the links in the description and use the various affiliate links that I have to support the channel. If you purchase something through my links, a couple pennies roll back my way. The price stays the same for you, and it's an easy way to support the channel. Now let's get into this. So in this article, what caught my eye was the title of it, A Few Tips on Bench Pressing. And I thought, oh man, Doug Hepburn, that'll be cool. Like the greatest bench presser ever giving some tips on bench pressing. But then when I read the article, it really wasn't what I was expecting because I was expecting things on technique and form and maybe even training, programming. And the article turned out to be all about equipment. It turned out to be about the bench itself and how to build yourself a bench like this or how to approach even a local shop. He advises, like, go to your local shop and ask them to build you a bench with these specifications. So then let's get into the article. I'm not going to read it word for word from start to finish. I will read different passages of it, and I'm going to be showing a whole lot of images throughout the video so that you get an idea of what I'm talking about. And then, as always, making some modern comparisons. So the first part of the article is pretty basic stuff. I wasn't too impressed. It was about, using a appropriate barbell that has spinning sleeves and using barbell collars, or else you might fail a lift and weights will fall off on either side. I mean, that's all stuff I sadly experienced when I started lifting way back in high school and just learned, the hard way. So maybe I shouldn't put it down. If I would have read this article, maybe I would have learned an easier way. But then it gets into this illustration that's in the article. And it says, in the illustration, you will see a bench identical to the one I used to set world records and has been tried and proven. You will notice that the top of this bench is slightly wider than most, as this affords a more substantial support for the back and shoulders. So this magazine's from 1960. So we're talking about, decades and decades, 60 plus years ago, and he's talking about a wide bench. So that immediately makes me think of some of the wide benches on the market now. So you've got the Thompson Fat Pad that Rogue sells. There's also Rep Fitness. They have a series of wide bench pads. And when you buy a bench from Rep Fitness, you can order it with either a standard or a wide bench pad. So this right away was an immediate kind of pique my interest moment with this bench design. So the reason that he argues for this is more support for the back and shoulders. Then he goes on to the supports. Now, I've made videos about vintage benches before and how dangerous they can be because you potentially, I'm sitting in a power rack where the barbell isn't going to crush me. I'm not going to miss the uprights. They extend all the way to the ceiling. But on a bench like this, it is possible you could miss the supports. So he talks about how this bench has adjustable supports, and these are not necessary as long as the bench is made with exactly the right length of supports so that it is tailor-made for you. So You could have adjustable or not. The advantage of the adjustable supports is that others can use the bench as well as yourself, and he gets into the proper height of them. So the height of these supports should be such that when the bar is resting on them and you are on the bench in the correct position to press with the hands properly placed, you should be able to lift the bar clear by only extending your arms 1 inch. And he even capitalizes that in the article, 1 inch, to drive that home. He says this is important because there's very little energy used in removing the bar. This is a necessity when you are attempting a limit lift. By limit lift, he means a PR. For example, could you imagine me struggling with 600 pounds before getting the bar into pressing position? Alas, even before pressing, I am already defeated both physically and psychologically. Even if I was lucky enough to succeed, is it not logical to assume that I could have done more if I had not depleted my strength jockeying the bar into pressing position? So, when it comes to that, I know most of you listeners are probably using modern benches. You're not going to go out there and buy a vintage bench. However, there's something to be learned here with that whole capitalized phrase of 1 inch distance. So he's arguing that where you put your J cups on your modern rack, or if you are using a bench that has adjustable uprights, to adjust them so that your arm length, you just have to push 1 inch up to get the bar off of the uprights. So that's off of the cups, the J cups, if you will. Not bad advice. I've got to admit, off the top of my head, I don't know if that's the case where I commonly put my J cups, and I'm going to double check before my next bench press training session. So we got some more capital letters coming up here, some more important points. So he says, on this subject, while I'm on this subject, another important point is brought to mind. You must get the bar into pressing position unassisted. So he argues for the next paragraph about how when you have two people assist you, so like in this image, you'll see that there's two people on either side, and the bench in this competition that he's in doesn't even have uprights, that they might position it poorly, that you're going to end up in a bad position, that you might even grasp the barbell in a poor position. So he's arguing that if you're trying to go for a PR, you should do it yourself. You should lift the bar out of the rack yourself. You shouldn't have people assisting you. Now, fast forward, I see people do an assist from a bench and from a rack all the time. There's even benches designed that have, that spotter kind of platform behind them. He's arguing more in this moment in history in 1960, 65 years ago, about people on either side of him lifting it. I think there's still something to be said for home gym owners that are lifting alone, that, you properly position yourself on the bench, that you have the proper height of your J cups so that you can, without injuring yourself, remove the bar on your own. So then he gets into the curved flanges. So the flange is the top part of the upright in this image of the bench that he's arguing to use. And that's the dangerous part when it comes to vintage benches. And I'll also argue when it comes to some modern benches that you might buy, some budget priced benches that really aren't, set up in a full rack kind of situation that have uprights attached to them, is that you're going to miss the flange and go behind you. So if you look at the flanges on his, he has them curving upward. So to essentially, kind of like a modern J cup, you're going to catch the back of it. Now, if I just even remove one of my J cups, you'll see here that, the height of this is essentially the same idea. I mean, I don't often hit the upright above this. If I do miss this, I hit this back portion of the J cup. And when you look at the flange on the upright of his, it's heading in this direction. So 65 years ago, not bad, Doug Hepburn. He's thinking through it. So then after that, he proceeds to talk about the front part of the flange also being lower, so that You can remove the bar, but having a slightly raised portion so that it's in a solid position. It's not going to roll off and crush you. He then says, perhaps the reader will wonder why I'm going into such detail concerning the construction of the bench press apparatus. Every detail is important as this will add many extra pounds to your eventual limit, to your PR. You also note in the illustration that in the front part of the bench, there are three legs, the two supports, which also serve as legs, and a middle brace. It's important to include this brace as it is a safety factor. You can readily see what would happen if the legs gave way when performing with heavy poundages, so it will not be necessary to go into the gruesome details. I don't know if you've ever seen some of these like bench fail videos that are out there. They are very unfortunate. Sometimes they show lifters getting injured where a cheaper bench, sometimes even an adjustable bench, just collapses because it doesn't have the proper supports and someone's trying to really lift a lot of weight. They're putting up 300 pounds and kaboom, it just all collapses. I've been lifting with a Rogue adjustable bench 3.0 that is like a tank. There's a rep Blackwing bench for sale on the used market near me that I'm strongly considering. I've been resisting it. It's been listed for 2 weeks now, but man, I want to try it out. It's a pop pin versus the ladder style Rogue that I currently have. So that has me a little bit hesitant. Nice, like Mike was just talking on the Home Gym podcast, um, or on Neural News, I should say, about his dislike of pop pin benches. So I don't know. We'll see if I pick it up or not. But where I'm going with this is when you look at commercial grade benches and when you look at companies that are selling benches that have, even 3x3 construction and steel construction, they have plenty of bracing. But he's in a time and era where on the very next page in the magazine, there's actually an advertisement for the company that publishes the magazine's equipment. So the Body Culture Equipment Company was the same company owned by Perry Rader, who published Iron Man magazine. And take a look at these benches, the long bench and the short bench. They don't have any bracing whatsoever. So way ahead of companies, Sorinex and Rogue and Rep and all these companies making benches that have plenty of support that aren't going to collapse. You've got Doug Hepburn arguing that, hey, like if you're going to lift like me, if you're going to be setting records, you need a better bench. And it's a little ironic that in this magazine, the paragraph is directly across from a bench that's inferior to the one that he's talking about. As far as this next recommendation, this is not going to sit well with current lifters and home gym owners. He says, I do not recommend any padding on the top of the bench as this detracts from the solidity of the position of the back, sometimes causing it to shift when pressing and throwing you off balance. That might sound a little harsh, like no padding. But what I want you to think about are the better quality bench pads that are out there. So whether it's Rogue or whether it's Reps, clear grip pads that they are now marketing, these have a grippy texture to them. So he's talking about slipping and moving on the bench, and that's well before any of this clear grip padding. I mean, this was just about getting to the point of vinyl kind of upholstering of bench pads and things that would be pretty slippery. And then the padding itself was literally like, your grandmother's couch, it was just like this soft, cushy. If you've ever bought used weights and ended up with an old bench, it is kind of unbelievable, like how soft, like they literally just stuffed like cotton in there. Like they just stuffed the bench pad the way you would stuff a throw pillow or something. So you've got to get rid of the modern notion of bench pads whenever you're reading this kind of recommendation and realize the time and era he's in. Fast forward, what he's advising is still pretty solid because when you buy a better bench pad, it's going to be firmer than something like a stuffed pillowy pad, and it's going to have a grippier, textured um, outer surface, if you will. Had to look for the word there for a second. Last but not least, he goes into some detail concerning the manner of the construction of the bench. and why he's talking about that. And he says that first, as I mentioned previously, is so that you can attain maximum efficiency. And the second reason for the construction of the bench like this that he says is equally important is for when bench pressing, the lifter is in an extremely vulnerable position as he is supine with a bar overhead. So, consequently, such apparatus must be completely accident proof. So, he's probably no stranger to some mishaps and accidents. I mean, the man was the first to ever lift 400 pounds, bench press 400 pounds. He was the first to ever bench press 450, first ever bench press 500, 550. He set various other world records, by the way. His PR on the bench, and this is back in the 1950s through the 60s, is 588 pounds, which I know we have some monsters out there, Julius Maddox and various people benching huge numbers, but 60 years ago, 588 pounds is pretty bonkers. So that's where he just really tries to slam home that bench construction is paramount. He says near the end here, he talks about making sure that the supports that hold the bar are the correct height. You know, he reminds you about that setting 1 inch above your extended arm, or below, I guess I should say, 1 inch below your fully extended arm. And he talks about, you know, measuring that, laying on the bench and actually measuring that out. And he talks about how, like I said, you could just go. He says the illustration will clarify these instructions. Of course, if the bench has adjustable supports, this process of measuring will not be necessary. And he says, be careful to explain to whomever is making your bench that this measurement is from the level where your back comes in contact. So, you know, he's, even though it's in a magazine that's selling benches of a variety of makers, like at the front of the magazine, Marcy Equipment Company. You know, I have some vintage Marcy deep dish plates. Marcy Equipment Company has a bench for sale. And this bench for sale by Marcy has proper J cups by his definition. It's got some bracing below. It is wider, which is nicer in terms of bar stability. But the bench surface itself doesn't look wider, which I think Doug Hepburn would take some issue with. So even in a magazine advertising benches for sale, he's still just espousing like, hey, you could just go get one made by someone. So Doug Hepburn on the very next page has an advertisement. And later on in life, like I said at the beginning, he really fought some demons. So actually, early in life too, I mean, he had some struggles that he overcame. So he was born with a deformed foot, commonly referred to as a club foot, that he had various surgeries for. He was cross-eyed, and struggled with some of that. Then, after becoming, you know, a world famous weightlifter, winning various things, later in life, he unfortunately struggled with alcoholism. And throughout some of these accolades in the 1950s, it grew worse and worse. And then afterwards, to the point of bankruptcy, living in a, you know, not a great situation, and then bouncing back from it and getting into recovery for alcoholism. And one last thing when it comes to his struggle with alcoholism is that I'll make a plug for the Reframe app. If you're at a serious level and you are an alcoholic, you may need more support than this app can offer. But if you're a casual drinker and you're just starting to drink too much and you want to cut back and you want to maybe even eliminate alcohol completely, the Reframe app is really a nice tool. I don't make any money off of talking about the Reframe app. It's just something I wanted to throw out there in case anyone wants to check it out. And I'll drop a link for that in the description as well. It gives you just like daily kind of advice and tracking and community support and a forum and all kinds of stuff. If you're interested in that, check out the Reframe app. He published, and on the very next page of this 1960 Ironman is a advertisement for an announcement to all weightlifters and bodybuilders that I'm not going to read the whole thing, but it's basically an advertisement for his training books. So he has all these training books, these revolutionary new books: How to Develop Strength and Bulk, The Secret of Bench Pressing, Olympic Pressing Made Easy, The Two Hands Curl. So he made some money selling those as well. He also marketed various equipment and things, protein powders. So he was able to get into recovery for alcoholism. And by the time he died, he actually pursued vegetarianism as well for health reasons, things like that. He lived into his 70s. And by the end of his life, he actually was giving away these books for free to anyone who wanted them that they might help. And he was quite a charitable man. So, a son of Canada, one of Canada's finest and one of the greatest lifters of all time, Doug Hepburn. I hope you enjoyed this little trip through history. Like I said, if you had your interest piqued by any of these modern products that I mentioned, any of these wide bench pads or benches that I mentioned, check out the links in the description because if you use my affiliate link, it will help support the channel. And if you haven't already done so, please hit the subscribe button so you don't miss any more videos here on Vintage Weights PGH. Thanks for watching.